What did the strange teacher at your school do that made them so strange? NSW. We had an anatomy teacher in high school that would accept roadkill or other dead animals in exchange for extra credit. He would then boil off all the tissue and reconstruct the skeleton for display in his room. His skeleton collection ranged from squirrels and foxes to an ostrich. Freaking overachiever. Whoever brought in a freaking ostrich? A health teacher from my former high school was actually arrested yesterday for selling 45 bags of H to a cop. And she's a superintendent's daughter. And our school has a huge H problem where 20+ kids have OD'd. Came here looking for my school. Knew this would be here. The coach of T. He girls basketball team had a separate office next to his teaching room. It was supposed to be an office, but instead he had a TV, pull-out love seat, and he had the windows tinted jet black. He taught typing and every class he would give us work and then go into his office with girls from his basketball team and shut the door. About 5 years after I graduated he was arrested for having had fricked over 8 high school girls that they know of. I looked him up and he was only convicted of fricking to underage girls, but neither were even the ones I saw him with. You can Google Lyman High School if you're really curious, even though I think there were a couple similar incidents there. Mr. P was our 6th grade homeroom guy and social studies teacher some subsequent years. He spanked everyone, boys and girls, over his knee on their birthdays. Then they signed his paddle. Celebrating a birthday. That's a paddlin'. Ambidextrous math teacher wrote on the whiteboard very quickly with both hands at the same time while wearing a red clown nose. He was so weird but so brilliant. Yes. It was college algebra and trigonometry, and with each hand at the same time he would very rapidly write completely different parts of a problem until the whole problem merged together, all while cracking jokes completely unrelated to the subject at hand. He would then go back and explain the problem step by step. Have you ever seen a comedian with a red clown nose do a Jekyll and Hyde act and be a really zany clown who tells bad jokes with his back turned to you while facing a wall, and be a straight-laced math professor while facing you? That was this insano. One of my professors would write with his right hand and erase it with his left hand as he went down the board. The class sucked. The music teacher couldn't calm the class down, so she yelled out "Frick you all," left the room and actually drove home. She didn't return for 3 weeks and refused to ever teach our class again. Teaching band, particularly grades 6-8, takes a special sort of teacher. You usually have 40 or 50 kids at a time, each of whom has a noise-making instrument which can drown you out. It is the stuff of nightmares if you don't have the right personality. My high school trigonometry teacher had this dreadlock that he showed everyone on the last day of class. You normally couldn't see it because his hair is so curly and puffy. Oh, and also because IT's 20 years old and he saved IT in a bag that he keeps in a cabinet in the back of the class. He convinced one kid to touch it. I had an ex who saved his bag of cut off dreads in a plastic bag and kept it in the bookshelf of our home. A strange one, he was. A teacher in my middle school would regularly threaten to throw his students in a classroom closet, where he kept his imaginary badger. He would also walk around the hallway while pretending to be a plane, complete with sounds, when he thought no one was watching. We were. My high school German teacher was very religious and told all of his classes he was saving himself for marriage and encouraged us all to do the same. When he came back to class after he got married, he finally looked like someone removed the stick out of his butt and he was relaxed for once in his life. Then he all told us to wait until marriage because it was worth the wait. Guess his new wife was pretty good in bed. Or good enough for him. He wouldn't know the difference. 8th grade French. She was pretty, quirky. She'd have us sing this love song in French, and then she'd be like, "Random boy in the class, I think, random girl in the class, yikes you." She was always trying to get people together. It happened to me once. Most embarrassing moment I'd ever had in that class. She also loved knowing about people's home lives, and would ask stuff like, "So, did you go to restaurant that you said you went to last week again this weekend?" Also, she really liked to couple students. She'd say stuff like, "Oh, Ben, you look very handsome today," and it was always towards Ben. She'd say it about one other boy in the class, but more often than not, it was about Ben. She'd also tell Christy how beautiful she was, and she'd say it all the time, never about anybody else. She had this weird habit of assuming people's races, so she ended up asking a black kid, who wasn't Muslim, if he was celebrating Eid. It was a weird conversation. She liked making dirty jokes, so she taught us about the Bayeux tapestry, and then looked for all the places that had a drawing of a dong in them. She called it a wing wong. She made a couple pop culture references, too. One time, nobody understood a lyric she quoted from Hey You're by Outkast, so she just played us the video. I was in her homeroom, and she thought of all of her homeroom students as her family, because all of her kids were at college. She also talked a lot about how she was old and was withering away. It was an interesting class. Sounds very much like my French relatives. I think it's just their culture to be up in each other's business and whatnot. Gossip is in their nature. Christian school. We had a sub for an all-girls elective that told us that you should think of Jesus when you're fricking your husband. She also said that orgasms are the highest form of worship to God. She never came back. A history teacher in my high school had narcolepsy, so he'd be in the middle of some story about Vietnam and then just pass out where he sat. We'd all just sit and talk amongst ourselves until he woke back up. Sometimes class ended before that, so we all just walked out and the next class came in and sat down. Maybe he was a pog and nam. Their flashbacks are pretty boring. Pretended to be a dinosaur to demonstrate Darwinism, like chasing students, sprinting round the class with his hands in front of him like a T-Rex. He would also run across the desks, jumping between them, roaring. He's the leader of our local council board now. What? That sounds awesome. Back in like 6th grade, our science teacher started out the year saying that she had crabs. A few minutes later she brought out a little tank with like 4 crabs. She did weird crap like this for the rest of the year. My 6th grade science teacher told us he was going to moon us, then proceeded to teach us about the phases of the moon. There was a history teacher that would just constantly eat bananas. I never saw him eat anything other than bananas. He used to get really angry when people would see him eating his banana too. He started to eat it in his office alone. I was looking for another teacher one day and looked into the classroom to see Mr. Banana Teacher eating his banana. He stormed out of the room and screamed at me for being in the hallway. Yeah, he was strange. He would make paper airplanes out of our tests and throw them one by one in the hallway. The further it got, the better the grade. He was a funny teacher though. I imagine this being a great way to give bonus points. There was a science physics teacher at my high school who put on this persona of being a complete psychopath who always spoke in a calm but cold emotionless voice for like the first 3 years of high school. It wasn't until I had him in my last year that I realized that he just does that to frick with the younger students. Actually turned out to be genius as it keeps all the young immature kids in line and gives him a reputation as super strict, which people don't get in on until they have matured up actually care about school. Because I don't know why you'd be doing physics if you didn't care. Absolutely legendary ruse on his part. Had a physics teacher who was exactly the same. He used to scare the crap out of the lower school kids, but was extremely laid back with the kids in their last 2 years. 7th grade English teacher. Her entire classroom was covered in hello kitty crap, and I mean the entire classroom. She always spoke in this weird, nasally falsetto voice, and was just in generally weird. This is in Midwestern America BTW. But she was also extremely nice, and was kinda known as the cool teacher because she'd let people goof off in class. This was back in the days of AIM, and one of the kids in my class happened to track down her screen name. So we'd IM her every once in a while just being stupid, immature middle school students. Until one day we looked in her AIM profile. It had a bunch of crappy Evanescence quotes and text art, as IMers were wont to do at the time. But way down at the bottom, we found a 1-letter hyperlink. That hyperlink led to an amateur piece site that had, you guessed it, pictures of our teacher all over it. Included in those pictures were her, handcuffed naked to her bed, as well as pictures of her fake slitting her wrists. It was a huge deal at the time. Superintendent was called in, yada yada yada. But because the students found her IM and she didn't give it to us herself, she didn't lose her job. Really made our weekly spelling tests an awkward affair for the rest of the year. My 8th grade pay health teacher was a raging alcoholic. Think WC. Fields. Big nose, slurred speech. During our unit on drugs and alcohol, he brought in his empty liquor bottle collection as a visual aid. We had pay and health on alternating days, and he would forget he had shown us his collection during the interim. So if he showed us his collection on Monday, he would show us again on Wednesday. This went on for several lessons. The following week, he had a sub one day, and the sub said the teacher had left a note saying he couldn't remember if he had shown us his bottle collection. Some of the students lied and said we hadn't seen it, so we got to see it again. In the spring, he collaborated with one of the high school pay teachers, also an alcoholic, to take his students on a field trip to the bowling alley. While we were bowling, they both went into the bar and came out with drinks. They said it was Diet Coke, but it was some pretty flat light colored Diet Coke in short glasses, if you know what I'm saying. Made us write essays about dragons. Like the ones that spew fire and crap. He wasn't joking though. He really believed that they were real. He was later laid off because multiple girls had reported him for touching them a little more than what comfortable was. I had nothing but strange teachers. One of the maths teachers had a breakdown randomly, climbed into the bin, slumped down inside it and wept uncontrollably until 2 other teachers came to escort him away. He never came back. An English teacher used to throw things at people and occasionally hit them when he got particularly annoyed. The history teacher was missing 2 fingers on his right hand, so always kept one hand in his pocket. He was a recovering alcoholic and a pretty angry dude. He swore continually, smoked in class and could find the most twisted way of insulting people. I actually thought he was pretty cool. He just hated his job. The 2 pay teachers were complete party animals who went out drinking every night and spent every day standing outside talking when they were supposed to be teaching. Another maths teacher was a very old lesbian who tried to disguise her lunchtime boozing by continually eating breath mints. There was also a geography teacher who seemed to be an on-again off-again alcoholic. He would disappear randomly and when he was there he spent his time wandering about. Another English teacher, not a young man by any means, fell in love with a very young student teacher and started sending her sonnets and calling her up at home. He ended up retiring early. That's only the tip of the iceberg. My school had, and still has in fact, a really good name for being the best in the area. A teacher in our middle school was arrested for fricking a 13-year-old boy in her minivan. That counts as strange, right? People make jokes about women teachers fricking male students as awesome and cool. Yes, very strange and fricked up. She screamed at me and kept me in at recess for simply having a small paperclip in my possession. I didn't even touch the dang thing. I took it off my math workbook and set it on my desk. Nobody knew why. Mr. Clippy probably touched her inappropriately at a young age and you went ahead and brought in one of his cousins to trigger a bad memory. You monster. I had a chem teacher in high school who was a total nutcase. One time, for an assignment, we tried making French toast in the lab. This resulted in 2 pans with holes burned through the bottom, and one chick in my class was nearly set on fire. Edit. I remembered that he tried the same crap again the next period. He was obsessed with wolves. He had pictures of them fricking everywhere. On Memorial Day, all my other teachers were talking about 9/11 and stuff. He showed us pictures of him swimming in Saddam Hussein's swimming pool in the Iraq War. He finally got fired after somebody caught him having a tickle fight with the 60-something-year-old male alcoholic janitor. One time another class dissected fetal pigs. They were keeping them in a drawer after class and one bag came open and leaked fluid all over the inside of the drawer. It didn't get cleaned up until the next year's chem teacher did it. Apparently there's also a stain on the ceiling from where he squeezed a pig spleen and it squirted all over. Picture, if you will, a full blackboard. The teacher, before wiping it clean, takes a thoughtful look at it and proceeds to wipe it. However, he leaves a E in the middle of the board. As he fills the blackboard again, the E fits in seamlessly. That guy was certainly dancing on the line between genius and madness. That sounds really cool. History teacher always used to tell stories about how he was in all of these wars, how he defended his house against tanks in 2008 with 2 of his family members and 3 AK-47s, always connecting stuff with the Illuminati or religion. told us more stories about how he fought 13 demons every day, giving a speech about how much he hates gays and how it's wrong to be gay every day, and not really teaching us much about history other than his. Also, he told us a story how he beat up 6 rugby players by himself when he was 16 while on a date. That sounds like something from 4chan. The science teachers at my junior high were the weird ones. One of them kept one of those vibrating ball toys, like the ones you'd get your dog to chase, on his desk, except when he'd show videos to the class. Apparently he'd turn it on once most of his class had dozed off and place it in his lap. There was a bomb threat one day and he jumped up when the alarm went off. Everybody noticed the toy fall from his lap and the fact that his pants were unzipped. The other science teacher wanted to go to med school but didn't, so he thought he was doctor. He'd medically diagnose kids in his classes with mental disorders or rare viruses. The real strange thing was that he removed a wart from his thumb with some sort of acid from the chemistry lab. Then the nail fell off and his whole thumb turned black over the course of the semester. I went to high school the following year, so I never did find out if the whole thumb eventually fell off. Dumbledore. An English teacher in my high school would rub her vag against the corners of the desks. It was always super uncomfortable hilarious if you'd call her over for help and she's just subtly and nonchalantly working it while talking about Beowulf. For some reason I'm now singing talking about Beowulf to the tune of Car Wash. My 8th grade science teacher. He kept animal organs in jars of formaldehyde. Not so strange for a science teacher, correct? Well, in this case these were all organs he harvested himself from animals on his farm. He rigged the clock in his room so that it ran backwards. So at noon the hands would be in the 6:30 position. During our first lesson he changed his shirt 14 times. Anytime the office would interrupt us, he would respond in Latin. He had an entire wall covered in the front page from Weekly World News. On assignments involving answering questions, our answers always had to have the question reworded in it. For example, what is the order of the planets in our solar system? We'd have to do an answer like this. The planets in our solar system in order from closest to the sun to furthest are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto. For students interested in it, he would loan out college-level books on subjects like quantum mechanics, physics, mathematics, etc. Best science teacher I ever had. Yes, I realize I forgot Neptune. I'll leave it standing the way it is, just because I can. He stepped outside to his car to change his shirts. He had a door from the classroom that led outside, and he parked near that door that day. Back then teachers did not require you to answer in full sentences if a word or two would do. He required it regardless of the answer and the question. Anytime the office would interrupt us, he would respond in Latin, only appropriate. Math teacher brings in random junk, expired candy, interesting looking garbage he finds on the street, decades old textbooks, broken appliances, that sort of thing, and gives it away as prizes for solving riddles and stuff. Sometimes there's something cool, but not very often. He's also got an old VW minibus parked outside the school. Not sure why though. He walks to and from school every day, and his wife, also a teacher, drives her own car every day. I suspect she won't let him park it in their driveway. And the puns. So many puns. Easily one of the best teachers I've ever had, but he's a tad strange. Another teacher at the same school is extremely open about private lives. When we watched The Odyssey, she talked in some detail about what she wanted to do to various characters. Fapped for like a week just to that description. Was she hot though? I had a science teacher that told us he was a saint. John's ambulance volunteer, and his greatest moment was when he gave mouth to a cat. I'm gonna defend him on this one. It was probably a really gratifying experience for him, saving an animal's life. My English teacher would always smell of booze and walk around with a coffee cup that smelled like moonshine. We believed he was a recovering sober guy. Most teachers I've met are pretty much constantly drunk outside school. I guess he just didn't bother with the staying sober during the school day. My English teacher in middle school was a pretty strange lady, but I liked her. She was about 55-60 or so, and always wore some kind of animal print clothing, usually leopard. Depending on the top she was wearing, she'd have a lacy black bra that was very obviously showing. She also had a tendency to wear rubber thimbles for going through papers, but she never took them off, so she usually had about 6 on her hands at all times, thumbs, index and middle fingers. She had these clear plastic high heels that she wore as well, but I could never figure out why, because her feet were a freaking disaster. Bunions and bandages and varicose veins all up in that crap. I spent half the classes mesmerized by her broke butt feet. When the class pee her off, she had the scary, husky IMP voice that boomed down the hallway. You could hear her chastising the class several doors down for acting like a bunch of heathens, and despite her small stature she was the scariest woman in my life at the time, not including my mother. She was also diabetic, so she was usually sucking on some kind of hard candy that would clack around in her mouth when she was angry. You'd see her lips purse, then clack clack clack. Those paying attention usually shut the frick up when that happened. She was freaking intense, but super nice so long as you were respectful of her and others. Despite her dressing a bit like a hussy, as she would have said, she was a proper southern lady, and loved it when you behaved like a proper gentleman to her. I actively avoided the whole southern gentleman thing, because I think it's freaking stupid, but I did it for her. She loved me. Actually, she's probably dead now. That last part is depressing. My high school was a nut house. Some of the best ones were biology physics teacher. There are a ton of stories, but one of my favorites is the time he caught 2 students hugging in the hall and yelled, with absolute conviction, that that was how gang violence starts. I forgot to mention that he made several videos starring his science hero alter ego Jack Terrain and would show them in class. Pre-calc teacher. He claimed to suffer from manic depressive disorder and would have episodes in class. During one class he lobbed some pretty inappropriate insults at me for talking, then spent the rest of the year creepily and profusely apologizing to me in private. He even cornered me at prom to do so. AP chemistry teacher proudly demonstrated her flexibility by putting her head between her ankles. This was directly after telling us that she and her husband met in high school. You STEM types are weird. I could write a freaking novel about my German teacher. I will try my best to describe him with little excerpts. So, we'll call him Mr. S. Mr. S was a complete lunatic. He was a squilly looking, balding, horrible comb over, nasally high-pitched voice that I wish I could explain further, but it really is just something else. He'd referred to classmates as freaks. He spoke German incorrectly, according to an actual German in our school, but still is teaching there. Yes, we called in. He had a fake tooth that he would take out with his tongue and scare kids with in class or hallways. Weird threats to students such as "I'm going to dip you in delectable sauce and let the ants carry you away," even if he was joking. Dear God. He would pace back and forth in class while kids were taking tests and talk to himself. Mostly whispers, and sometimes he'd giggle. Yes, giggle. He'd spit as he talked all the time. Hit my face once. Really pee about that still. I know Germans have a harsh language, but frick. Once there was a fight in the hallway. Usually a teacher is supposed to intervene. Instead, he sprints down the hallway to find a female teacher to break up the fight. On top of this, he had huge anger problem. He would freak out when people interrupted him, or even with no one did. I mean literally dead silence. Then all of a sudden he would throw markers, chalk, which he claimed he was allergic to, and the color blue. What the frick? Markers, paper, pencils, you name it. Would eat bananas at his desk. I'm not kidding. I've never seen anyone eat a banana like that. I gotta think of some more. To go with this, we had an ongoing battle of pranks we pulled on the guy, which is a whole other sub. Some I feel bad looking back on, but he really was a prick. Didn't help he was very strange on top of that. My art teacher a couple of years ago, let's call her Miss Knob. Miss Knob was famous for giving 30-minute detentions. That might not seem that strange, however, she had a knack for giving them out for the smallest of things. For example, I once had a cough and said present in a sniffly way. She gave me a 30-minute for being silly. My friend once got 430 ms worth of detentions in one lesson. Sounds like your friend was going for the high score. He taught government during the week and did karaoke at a Mexican restaurant on the weekends. He'd also get super drunk, went by Cowboy Bill, and would sing and dance with students of his. German teacher that claimed I love kids but I can't eat a whole one. math teacher that showed us video of his extensive Star Wars action figure collection. The room he kept them in had 4 different colored walls representing Tatooine, Huff, Ender, and Cloud City. I originally said Dagobah but meant Ender. Thanks you farts and butts. Also Hoth and not both. Smartphones my butt. Both were excellent teachers. The IC teacher at my high school believes in fairies. If you say fairies don't exist, you will be reprimanded. Sometimes her fingers are fairies and she talks to them. There have been many teachers in the district who were fired for watching P during class. One that I know of who was arrested for fricking a 7th grade student, and several other teachers supposedly knew about it before he was fired. My French teacher who I believe is a paranoid schizophrenic, and so on. This is what happens when being a teacher isn't a respected profession and don't get a high enough salary to entice anyone who isn't crazy to do it. I guess you don't get to make your wishes during class since your teacher probably has some way to detect existence of fairies. Bought girls chocolates, teddies and concert tickets. Commented on their skirt length, smacked a girl's butt 1 year. He was in a permanent teaching position so he didn't leave the school until last year after teaching there for 34 years. Irish law is stupid. He also didn't teach us any of our course at all and we're trying to cram the 2-year course into what little time we have left with our new teacher. Sigh. I had this teacher who used to cut up licorice with these gross, rusty looking scissors and give everyone in the class a piece. This went down every day. Looking back, I think that was very creepy. Everyone needs a little tetanus. I had a teacher who would knock on the blackboard with the chalk while writing and ask the class who is knocking. The dude was messing with us pretty seriously, I hope. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.